Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we have a special guest who's done 18 years in law enforcement somewhere or another. At the moment, he's currently a corrections officer. So he's going to talk about experiences dealing with that, how he's fought burnout, how he prevents it, and we will go dive straight into that. As I always say, and as I always start this, take one thing away from today. If you can just take one thing away and actually put it into action, you'll be way better off in a year's time than if you just listen and don't do anything with it. Also, we are sponsored by the retreat that I am putting on here in May. It is called Lean Into It, where we take you around the southwest of the U.S. on motorcycles. You do need to know how to ride a motorcycle. And we teach you how to not burn out. Also, we have some business development people coming along as well. So you're going to be able to mastermind with them and learn and grow. Have a great time. And it is full VIP experience. If you want to know more about that, go to motorcyclemastermind.com and you'll find out more there. So without further ado, Michael, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you got to where you are, and then we'll kind of go on from there.
Well, Chandler, I always like to start off with the personal side. I am a father. I have a 9-year-old son. His whole name is Michael Laidler Jr. Apparently, he's a replica of me. So if you've seen him right now, or if he was here with me, he'd be like, yes, I look just like my dad, just a miniature version of it. So I always start off by saying I'm a dad first. And I think that's important for people to hear, because sometimes we take our profession and we want to explain that so much that we forget where we actually come from and who's going to be around when we leave the profession that we're in right now. So I always start off with that. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, by a single mother and a disabled grandmother. They loved me to death. They taught me a lot of things about resiliency. They taught me about how to push forward. They taught me how to care for people. While I was growing up, I took an interest in law enforcement, specifically when the O.J. Simpson trial happened in the early 90s. Just watching that chase, the trial, the way he won, talk about the gloves don't fit, you must have quit. All that stuff just made me want to be like a LA police department homicide detective. Now, I never got to that dream, but that's what got me into law enforcement back when I was like 6 and 7 years old. So I studied law enforcement throughout high school. I went to college at Florida State University. While I was there, after my first year, my sister was a dispatcher for the police department. And she was like, hey, look, they're hiring. You need 60 credit hours to get on. I was like, you know what? I'm 19. Kind of let's see what happens. Worst case scenario, I still got to finish my college. So I actually applied. And at 19 and a half, I was in the police academy, fully sponsored. They paid for the academy for me to go. By the time I graduated, I was still 19. When I was sworn in, I was 19. By the time I hit the streets, I had just turned 20. So very young police officer, a lot of experience early on that taught me a lot about life, a lot of experience that we're going to probably talk about throughout this episode, traumatic experiences, making decisions for other adults, things that you wouldn't expect to encounter in your early 20s. And a lot of us don't think about that because they don't really teach that in school. They briefly talk about that in the academy, but they really don't tell you what you're really going to be doing once you hit that street. So I was a police officer, a field training officer. I did a little bit of tactical stuff, but then I decided that, you know what, I want to get into the federal system. I tried the FBI. It didn't work. I was like, crap, they didn't want me yet. So I was like, what's available next? And I swung and I hit a home run when I got into Border Patrol. That was an intense experience. It was an amazing time. The pay was great. The work was great. I had a K9 partner. I was hitting all the marks. So I was like, okay, this is fun. This is going good. And then my wife at the time said, I'm pregnant. And I was like, gosh, all right, what does that mean? We were in a state where we had no family. So once again, remember, I'm going back to the family side because that's the most important thing. I had a great career. We had great pay. We had great benefits, but I had to realize what was more important, raising my son around family or my career. So I went from being a very successful Border Patrol agent, which I had a trajectory of continued success, to join the federal prisons. I went back to the lowest level at the time and became a correctional officer. Then I was like, you know what? I want a little bit more excitement. I became an investigator within that prison system. Then I became a lieutenant. And that's where my journey truly began in leadership development. Because what I realized as a leader is that I never wanted to be that person that looked like a fool talking in front of others. That's
Yeah.
something that I didn't want. So we all have weird motivations. In my profession, that was my motivation. I did
Yeah.
not want to be standing in front of a group as a lieutenant, stuttering or trying to explain a scenario to somebody and saying and and I did not want to experience that at all. So around that time, I joined Toastmasters,
Yep.
international organization, very inexpensive, but
Mm.
they taught me two things. They taught me public speaking and they taught me about leadership. And it started to change how I started to look at things. It started to change how my perspective about everything that was around. Because, you know, in leadership, a lot of us gain that through experience.
Yeah.
We don't always gain it through education. And to be highly successful in it, you need both. I can tell you right now, I've dealt with leaders throughout my life. I train leaders, and the majority of them have only been trained 40 to 80 hours, and the rest of their life has been experience. And I know that that's not a good formula. So in my Toastmaster journey, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I saw one of my buddies was in the John Maxwell team. That's another leader that has his certification program. And I was like, you know what? I want to step up my game a little bit more. I got into that program, got certified being a coach, trainer, and speaker. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. I think I can open up a business on leadership development. So in October of 2017, I actually opened my business, Michael Laidler Unlimited, to that business that I operate in today. And 2018 was amazing. I did a lot of speaking. I really built that craft up, but then I moved to another state for a promotion. So I kind of scaled down. But during that time, in March of 2019, I was sitting at my desk and I remember getting a phone call from somebody saying, Ben is dead. I was like, what do you mean Ben is dead? Like, Ben Valle? They was like, yeah. I was like, no. Something must have happened to him. They said, no, he committed suicide. And I was like, what do you mean he committed suicide? I just talked to him last month. Like, this is a guy, Dallas Cowboys fan. Like, we're having barbecues when we lived in the same state together. I said, no, there's no way. They was like, no, he really did. He's dead. I was stumped. I had other people texting and calling, like, man, did you hear, man? How are you feeling? And at the time in 2019, I hadn't really focused on self-awareness yet.
Mm.
So a lot of things I asked myself was, what could I have done differently to impact him? What could I have changed to maybe increase his scenario? Should I have called him? Should I have gave him a book? What could I have done? And then my micro thinking was, well, okay, that's just one friend. That's really okay. That's not out of the ordinary. So I kept going on with my life, not thinking how that impacted me. And then 2020 came around, COVID, George Floyd, and I'm like, man, what is going on in law enforcement? My buddy dies a year before. The next year, the whole country shut down. People are assaulting people on the streets. I was like, this is not good. This isn't a good for law enforcement in general. So although I had the speaking business, I wasn't really cultivating the way I wanted to. So 2019, I spoke once. 2020, I spoke 0 times. 2021, I spoke 0 times. And probably halfway through 21, you know, you wake up you're taking that shower. I get my best thoughts during that time. And I was like, I need to take this speaking back to law enforcement. I have developed myself. I have developed this skill, but I'm not using it. I'm not using it to improve the brothers and sisters that I work around every single day, whether they're police officers, correctional officers, special agents. I was like, what am I doing to make them better? So then I started thinking, okay, how can I build my business? What can I do? And then I got with this organization that taught me about marketing, changed my whole perspective of how to do things. So 3 years, I had 1 speaking engagement. In 2022, I had 15 speaking engagements.
Wow.
Traveling all through the country. I wrote a book. I published another e-course. I did executive coaching. I was doing leadership assessments for police departments. all because I had a shift in my mindset on things that had happened, which if I was more self-aware at the time, one, I could have probably changed my friend's trajectory, or two, I could have had answers for others a lot quicker. So the way I got to where I'm at today, life experience and education, the leadership development has been there. I think that when you hear speakers like Les Brown, Jim Rome, guys of that nature, they'll talk about if you do anything for 5 years, you become an expert. I'm not an expert by no means, but from 2016 to 2023, actually focusing on my growth, I have made a world of a difference in my life, my family's life, and my organization's life. But a lot of that's been just derived around experience. Like I've been fortunate enough not to have that extensive to where I've ever felt that way. But obviously, I have experienced some things. I mean, I'm divorced. I mean, I've been in law enforcement. I mean, we all know what we've seen by, and not always by choice. we never go into work thinking, I never go into work thinking, hey, I'm about to get rough with this citizen or I'm about to fight this inmate. I've never had that thought. I've never been excited. But have I seen it? Have I experienced it? Yes, I have. So what has got me to this journey where I'm at today is 18 years of law enforcement experience, being around people that should have not passed away, at least in my mind, and wanting to provide solutions for those that have experienced things like burnout, because I think this show is a perfect platform for something like that, because obviously, whatever word you want to use, burnout's usually the best word. That's what happened to him. Mm-hmm. Because most suicides aren't just you shoot yourself with a shotgun. That didn't just happen by mistake. Yeah. And that's a very violent way to go. So something in his mind clicked. And while I'm not a psychologist, I'm sure if there are certain things that he would have known about himself or allowed him to become better, I truly believe that his life would have been a little differently. So I start looking at the macro picture now, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to deliver self-awareness to initially and mostly law enforcement officers, but as I've spoken more, I have realized it's a lot of industries that need it.
There are a ton of industries. I'm glad you said that. There's a ton of industries that need it. But yeah, we do talk to law enforcement because in my eyes, it's the best job in the world, but the hardest as well, because you're in it all the time. Thanks for telling us your journey, how you got to where you are now, everything you've experienced. Before we move forward and I start asking you questions about your career and different things, I always forget to ask this question, but I think it's a really important one. What would you define as burnout? Obviously, there's the Webster Dictionary. There's, but everybody has their kind of own different interpretation of it. What would you say your definition of burnout is for you?
Now, I'll be straightforward. I've never looked up the definition at all, and I'm not going to, because I know how it feels. It's that, and I'm going to use a technical term, it's that physiological response that your body has to stress when you've had too much and your body hasn't caught up to it. We all go through stress, and realistically, we all handle stress differently. In law enforcement, you build a higher tolerance, but that doesn't mean that you should have a higher tolerance. I mean, traumatic experiences are traumatic experiences. So when people are like, oh, I've seen that before, I'm normal, you're lying. Because if the next person looks at it that's not law enforcement and they're having a freak out, that's probably more of a normal response. Yeah. So for me, burnout is, for anybody, no matter what level you're at, is when your stress gets higher than you can handle and you don't know how to handle it. Because no matter what, you still got to handle it. You have to overcome it at some point. But I think when you get to the point to where you're banging your head theoretically against that wall too much, you're burned out. If you go to work and you're pissed off every time you're at work, if you dread putting on your boots, putting on your uniform, if you dread dealing with that inmate, you're burnt out. I mean, seriously, let's just take it even outside the job. If you're looking at a crowd of people and you're thinking, man, there's danger. Does he have a gun? What is this person talking about? Do I need to look over my shoulder? You're burnt out. I mean, seriously, for me, it's a very simple definition. Like, if you can't function like a person that's not in law enforcement, you're probably experiencing some levels of burnout. But it's up to you to figure out how to handle it. But more than likely, you're going to be in that level. So for me, burnout is when stress gets to the point to where you think you can handle it, but you're not really handling it well, and it's starting to show.
Yeah, yeah. So many questions could come off the back of that. But the next one that I want to know most importantly, have you had a time where you felt like that?
Heck yeah, definitely. Shoot, I've been waiting to answer this question. I didn't want to reveal this one right away. Shoot.
what's the most what's the time when it was like the most like severe? Tell us that.
I got that one. I wanted to warm you guys up with Benjamin and his situation. I didn't want to get on me right away because a lot of times I've learned it's about others. So yeah. I want to highlight what's happened to them to pay remembrance of what they've been and the kind of person they are. I had my burnout, I want to say my second year as a police officer. It was my longest career, or excuse me, my longest week as an LEO. The longest. The first incident, I used to work swing shift, and we worked 10-hour shifts when I was in Tallahassee Police, and I was on the 4 to 2. And within that first hour of that particular shift, I was working my area, which was, I want to say 4 Bravo. It's the zones are a little different now, but it was Tallahassee, Florida. If you've ever been there, there's a place called Governor Square Mall. It's a lot of colleges in the general area, Florida State, FAMU. So just picture being between 4 and 5 p.m. It's your regular Sunday afternoon, and you just got on patrol. You're like, okay, where are we going to go eat lunch at? I know we just got on post, but we got to have a little snack before we hit these calls. There was no time for snacks on this day, unfortunately.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah. We got out as a squad. By 4:30, we already broke from muster. We were already driving. So all of a sudden we hear that call, traffic crash with injuries. Okay. It's not uncommon. It's between 4 and 5. I mean, it's that time of the day where there's a lot of traffic, rush hours. So, we hit the lights and sirens. I mean, when I say we had patrol vehicles. Most of us rode solo. So I hit my lights and sirens, and 4 of us end up going to this call. It's on Appalachian Parkway. We get there, and the first thing I remember seeing was a van flipped over. So I was like, okay, that's not you don't see that every day. Obviously I can't unflip the van, so I already know I'm out of that category. So we pull up. I pull up with, I remember it was officers Rudd, Bascom, and Roa. Roe, he was about 6 months junior to me, but the other 2 guys senior, 10, 15 years in each. All of them bigger than me. So we walk up to the van, it's flipped over, and we realize there's one passenger trapped in the car. Fire department hasn't got there yet. Usually fire department beats you everywhere. I don't know how they get those trucks and those engines. They're amazing.
Yeah, it astonishes me as well. Every single time the fire truck is there before you, you're like, I'm in a little patrol car and you're in that like, what? How?
I don't know. This is the one time we beat them there. I was like, where's EMS? Where's it? Like, how am I here before the fire truck? Like, what am I supposed to do? I have an asp on my hip. My other partners have baton. So, I mean, we don't have like the claws and stuff like that, the jaws of life and the cool tools. We don't have that like they have on Chicago Fire. We don't have none of those tools. So we get there, the lady's trapped in there, and the windshield, like she's on the driver's side and her arm's trapped in the door, so she can't get out at all. So we all look at each other. And mind you, I said I started at 19, 2 years in, I was 21 years old. Probably, well, I'm 5'10", I'm still 5'10", probably about 175. Everybody else is 200 plus. So I get that look and I'm like, so what are we going to do? And they just look at me and say, you're going inside.
Yeah.
What do you mean I'm going inside? We're going to hoist you up in your polyester uniform with your vest under, because this was around 2006. So we didn't have the outer vest like that. Yeah. So mind you, 4:30 in the afternoon, Tallahassee, Florida, summertime. Picture all of that going on. Full blue polyester, all your duty gear on. You got we didn't have tasers yet, but you had your baton, your double cuffs, your radio. I said, okay. I had no choice, really. I mean, I didn't mind doing it, but it was still one of those, we're going to hoist you in. We're going to hold your legs, and your job is to apply pressure until the fire department gets here. So I was like, oh.
It was on its side, eh?
Yeah, it was on the driver's side. So her arm was. So they said, "All right." I said, "Are you?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm in the car." So I'm dangling like all I have is my torso going through the passenger window.
Yeah,
and all I had was I forgot if it was a towel or a rag, but they gave me a towel. And when I looked in there, I could see her arm was severed. Like I can see the severed arm. In her other hand, she actually had a picture of her son. And all she could say was, me, hijo. Because she had the look in her eyes like she was ready to go.
Yeah.
Like in her head, she was dying. So I have to use some Spanish, some stuff I learned in school. Like, hey, it's all right. Fire department's going to be here. I still don't know where they're at because I'm inside sweating. I don't know what's going on out there. But I in my head, this lasted 2 or 3 minutes. I think it probably was like 20 or 30 seconds. But yeah. I know that while I was in there, my coworkers, they were trying their best to break over the windshield. So I'm trying to apply pressure to her arm, console her while they're trying to break out a window. So whatever the time frame was, 30 seconds, 30 minutes, really probably closer to 30 seconds. The fire department gets there. They fortunately take off the windshield. They get her out. They get her out, and she didn't die. Thank goodness. She went through surgery, and her arm was, severed completely. Her arm was gone.
Yeah.
But that first experience, just being in there, was stressful because we didn't talk about that in the academy. When I was going through the in-service training, they never said, hey, Michael, we're going to put you through the side of a window and you're going to have to apply pressure to a severed arm and console an individual, telling them that everything's going to be all right. Very high stressful. After the incident, we did our paperwork, went back to work.
Yep.
I might have dried I might have put I might have unzipped my AC, my vest, and let the AC in there, maybe for an hour, got back to work. There was no debrief. There was no therapy after. There was no, hey, how'd your shift go? It's like, all right, let's do this report. What's our next call? So that was the first half. So for those listening, if that's a normal day, that's not normal. It was so unnormal that we all got a life-saving award for it because of how intense that was. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot of discussion on how to mentally handle something like that, because I could
process it.
Yeah,
process it.
What is it? 17 years later, I could still picture that incident in my head. So we talk about things like PTSD. We talk about like trauma-related brain like disorder. Like those things stick in your head. I never wanted.
I can remember every single dead body that I went to. I can remember still vividly.
Correct. So the week wasn't even over yet. Remember, I said 2 things in 1 week. And that wasn't even the most intense thing that happened. So I want to say a day or 2 later, it was all within the same week. Another situation is roll call's over, muster's over. We're heading out. I think that we actually get to the fire department and we're just heating food up. I don't know what we're doing. But then we get a call. It was a medical call in a residential neighborhood, saying that an infant was having a hard time breathing. So I was like, well, that's never good. So me and my partner, Ray Roa, said when I was on the call with me before, we respond to that call.
It's always strange. Again. It's always strange though, isn't it? When a cop gets sent to an infant that can't breathe, you're like, why are you sending a cop to this?
Correct. Yeah. So,
what else is going on that needs us?
Keep the fire department. I was like, this can't be happening again. There's no way. But I'm not gonna lie. 21 years old. I drove a little fast back then. I'll be honest. There was lights and sirens. I had a blue and white car. I made it to a lot of places quickly. Yeah. Back in the day. Yeah. I don't drive that fast right now. I got it all out of my system. People are like, why do you drive so slow? Because I don't have to drive fast. I'm done. Like I got it out for situations like that. We get there. We pull up. We both get to the house, single family dwelling. As soon as we get to the front door, the door opens. Everybody's in the house frantic. Probably at least 10 people inside the house. We walk in, they're like, here. And we're like, what do you mean here? They give me the baby. There's nothing going on with that baby. Lifeless. Nothing. I have a baby, probably 3 to 6 months in my hands, and they're just yelling frantic, like, do something. And I'm like, there's not much I can do. I mean, the baby's eyes are pretty much white. Like, I'm not sure. So within 30 seconds to a minute, boom, firefighters. I don't know. I can't remember if the door was open when they got there, but it was open by the time they walked through. They get there. I get a stiff arm. They take the baby and they're doing CPR right out the gate. I think I even started CPR. That's a blur. All I know is I got in there. Everybody was frantic and they gave me a lifeless baby. I do remember that part. They take the baby. They're like that. You can see they're sweating too. They're doing everything they can. We know what the result of what that particular call was. Similar outcome when it came to the debrief side. We didn't really talk to nobody after this at all.
Did any of your colleagues on either one of these talk to you about anything?
No, because we just, at the time, 2006, there wasn't anything to talk about. It was like, hey, that's your job. You just took, hey, you're supposed to be able to, we teach you EMS, medical responses. Yeah, but not to that level. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that? So, 2 incidents, 1 week. The very next day, me and Ray Rolla decide that we need a break. So, what do you think we did to? But what do you think we did?
Good call on the break, but you most likely went to the bar, or went to one of each other's houses, and got absolutely shit faced.
There used to be a place called Calico Jack's in Tallahassee, Florida. They had all you can eat crab legs and all you can drink Blue Moon. We did both. We did not, neither of us drove, but we responded. That's the only way we knew how to. I was 21. I think he was 23. Our ladies at the time, which one of the ladies is his wife right now, they were drivers. They was like, all right, we're just going to take you guys out. Y'all do your thing. We did the worst response we probably could have done that night.
Sad thing is most 21 to 23-year-olds still do the same thing to this day, even with some of the mental health training.
Correct. Yeah. But we didn't know. It wasn't like, all right, in a month, we're going to debrief. It ain't like there was a referral done. We didn't have employee assistance programs. And let me take that back. I don't remember having an employee assistance program back then, because I do believe it was there by far, because it's a federally funded program.
Sounds like a similar situation to me. I asked one of my colleagues when I was going through hell, and my wife and I were like not on a very good spot, like about 3 years into the job. And I went to her and I was like, oh, wife and I are having issues. She's like, oh, maybe you should go talk to the welfare lady downstairs. And I was like, the who? Because I remember back in college, they told us that you'd have a welfare person, but I'd never met or knew where this person was. Probably because they're in the back office, in the back room, in the back downstairs where like nobody goes to. But
they were not accessible.
Yeah. No. So we used to do the same thing. We'd get drunk, we'd take the piss out of each other, we'd crack jokes about each other, and that was your debrief once every 4 months with each other around, forcing each other to get absolutely trashed.
And that's what that night was. It was a long night for both of us, to say the least, but that was our only response at the time. And obviously, and I will say, obviously, I didn't recognize that was burnout at the time. Fast forward to 2018, 2019, 2023. I now look back at that, and when I do podcasts or I do presentations or I do any kind of coaching, I reference stories like that because I didn't know any better back then. But there's more opportunities for people to know better now. And I think that's where you and I come in, Chandler, because
so Michael, I've got a question off of that. So you had that stage with burnout. You're going out with your buddy, got drunk, talked shit, probably debriefed yourselves around some stuff once you got a few drinks in you, and it was like the liquid courage came out, and you're like, oh yeah, no, I can talk about this stuff now, which is a good thing in a way. Moving through your career and having, obviously there's probably more incidents where you went to things like that, and that stress, being able to cope with the stress, probably the level started to become, it became better and better, or you were better at stuffing away, depending on which one you are. How have you seen it affect you, the compounding effects of the burnout over the years? Have you seen that? Has that ever bubbled up and affected you in any way?
I think that I don't want to say fortunate enough, because I think that's a horrible word to use, but I think I was able to manage it in a sense of it never surfaced. And I don't know if that's just growing up at a time, like just growing up in Miami, moving all the time, not being around my father, seeing things even when I was younger, nothing to that extreme when it came to death, but kind of realizing that, oh, this is life. It happens. This is just get over it kind of mentality, which I know a lot of us in law enforcement, military, or just depends on your background. It's like, hey, this is life. Get over it. So I think I had a lot of that going against me, but I have seen it to where now, even nowadays, I don't react to things like a normal person would. Not, I don't react aggressively, but I just act like, okay, so that happened. Now what? People say, you have no reaction to that. And I'm like, because I don't see any issue. And to a normal person, they're like, you don't see any issue with that, would just happen? And I'm like, no. So yes, compounding, I do believe it is there for me. I just move around it differently. And I've also been training myself a lot more now to handle. So I recognize it, because 5-6 years ago, I probably couldn't answer that question with so much confidence like I do now, because I wasn't focused on self-awareness like I am today. Like, I know the things I have to do to decompress. I know how to practice mindfulness. I know how to take a break. I know how to remove myself from all negative stimuli. I know how to do that now. I know how
to prevent it. You know how to prevent it from getting to the bad stages.
I know if I want to drink, it's not going to be after an incident like that, because I know that's not it's not going to help me process it. I know,
not in response to the incident, it's because you choose to want to have a drink.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind going to counseling or therapy. It's nothing wrong with that. But you asked me that 5-10 years ago, that wasn't in me. That just wasn't, it wasn't a first response like, hey, let's get this right. So it has compounded. I just think that now, like looking at my 2023 self, when I see things, I know what I need to do right away. I know I need to go vent to somebody. I know I need to talk through it. I know I do not need the drink. I know I do not need to do any negative behaviors that don't allow me to get it out of my system. I understand that now. I also look more of, how can I not be in those situations? Depending on your role, if you're a street police officer, a street deputy, sheriff, you're going to be in it. But you have to find ways to work around it to prepare yourself for it. And I think that's where, once again, you and I come in, Chandler, because we're like, hey, this is what we know it's coming. We just want you to be ready for it. That's where it comes down to. So yes, I do have burnout. I do not always respond to things like a normal person would, but I recognize it and I address it.
I love that you say that you don't respond to things like a normal person does. It's just like my wife always says, she's like, I love having you around when shit hits the fan. Like when things go chaotic, she's like, you're the calmest person that I know. Like everything can be going crazy and you're just like, okay, cool. Like she ended up in hospital one time and she does not like needles when they draw blood and stuff like that. Like really has this massive fear, and started hyperventilating, even had, I forget what the seizure is called, but where like there's so like where she kind of started to convulse, and she's like, she was fully aware there, but had no control over her body because she so much CO2, and the guy's like, you need to breathe, and I had I said to them, like, she does not like having her blood drawn in that, and like I had all the other stressors going on, and she's afterwards, she was like, you were so calm, like so calm that. But I'm like, well, what else am I going to do? And that's a law enforcement reaction. It's like, well, if I'm not calm, things are going to be worse. Yeah. And then like, when I was doing some insurance advising for a while, people used to be like, man, you're so good with complaints. I was like, yeah, they're on the other side of a telephone. It's not like they have a gun to my head. I mean,
they pose no real danger.
They pose real no danger. I can always hang up on them if I so choose. Yeah. I'm like, why do you have such an issue with them? It's not like they have a gun to your head. I mean, they're not trying to kill you. But it's that same response, and it's just building that. I guess that's where that resiliency thing comes in. But I also wanted to touch on something, and you can shut me down and say no, you don't want to talk about it if you don't want to. But you had mentioned that you've gone through a divorce, and I know law enforcement has the highest rate of divorce. And what I've recognized, and even the stats come out of it, and that a lot of it's caused from the job, from the trauma of it, from the burnout, and then it affects our relationship. Then our relationship affects work, and it does this little cycle thing. but a lot of times the cause is from work. I know for myself, the counselor told my wife and I when I was burned out and I was wanting a divorce from my wife, the counselor goes, 80% of people won't make it through this. My wife and I are still together to this day because of choices that we
Congratulations on
made
that.
and stuff like that. Yeah, like I said, like
She's
we're the
strong.
20%.
She's a strong woman.
Yeah, she's a very strong woman. She's the only reason.
Don't mess up anymore. Don't mess up anymore.
She's one of the reasons I'm probably still alive, because she's such a strong woman. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask you, what do you believe that any of the trauma and maybe little bouts of burnout or not dealing with things in the way that you know how to now had any cause around the relationship breakup?
of course.
A breakdown?
Absolutely. I think that as we so resilience is twofold. When it comes to our profession, you should have resilience. But sometimes when you have your personal life, that resilience is so strong, you don't know how to turn off that emotionless switch to turn it on. And that's what I mean, I still fall to things like that today. Some like I was telling you before, Chandler, hey, people are like, why are you not reacting? Because that just wasn't that extensive to me. Like I picture an inmate getting stabbed. That's kind of stressful. And I have to elevate my stress level up to that versus us having an argument, which I'm just like, okay, this is an argument. Like this is just a miscommunication or a disagreement. So I'm not going to get that elevated because this isn't going to end my life. But this over here, an inmate try to stab me or someone try to run me over with a car, that might end my life. And I've learned to calm myself down because in law enforcement, what do we learn in the academy? Slow everything down.
Yeah.
So where it doesn't stress you out. That's what we learn. Those 6 months, I did probably like 12 months between Border Patrol and police, but nevertheless, we always tell ourselves, slow down.
Take a big deep breath, slow down. Yeah. Don't go into adrenaline. Don't go into fight or flight. Yep.
Correct. And sometimes, I mean, for me, being in a relationship, especially with my ex, that's things that I should have probably been more elevated on as far as my response. I just wasn't because I was like, it's not that serious. Like, let's get over it and let's be through with it. Because my mind was able to switch it off quickly. You go to calls for service, you deal with inmate issues, you deal with illegal alien issues in Border Patrol. Whatever it is, you handle it and it's over. In a relationship, it's not. Like, you still have to go through to this person every day. But it's like, hey, we talked about it, boom, let's go. And it took me a while to realize that I have that in me based because of my law enforcement background. So while we know how to fight through stressful situations, people say, oh, turn it off when you get home. That's such BS. I don't know what book they read or what person and I hope I don't offend some people. I don't know what criminal justice professor is lying about that. You can't just turn off stress. You can't turn off one response that you've been trained to do and get home and just be perfect. It doesn't work like that. None of us want that. Like, all of us want just to be normal. Like, all of us want to have that normal side right here. We want to be able to just go to our spouse, our significant other, our children, our parents, and just be like them with no.
Once you know something, you can't unknow it.
Yeah. So yes, it.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. And so no, you answered it perfectly. There's that, I tell people all the time, law enforcement and myself, I can speak to myself. We have some of the strongest minds in the world. But that's also a double-edged sword, because we have such a strong mind. We can grind through the pain. We can grind through the burnout and think that it's all okay. We can grind through the relationship breaking down and be like, oh no, it'll be fine. And not actually look at it and process it. And that whole, like you said, just switch it off. There is no switching it off. I was having a conversation with a past client, and her husband's just gone through like our version of SWAT selection course and stuff. And a couple weeks ago, he had an armed robbery happen next door to where they were having dinner, and he went in and to stop these guys doing these dairy robberies. And that turned out the person had a gun and put a gun to his chest. Like 2 weeks before I did the SWAT level training in that. And he's like, no, I'm totally good. I'm like, and she's like, no, he said he was totally fine. I was like, yeah, bullshit.
Yeah, no,
like,
yeah.
I was like, it's going to come up.
Yeah, he told her that.
I was like, he even told the bosses that, told everybody. I'm like, he might be fine with that situation. Like they do some reintegration trainings and stuff like that with him. And I was like, yeah, he might be fine with that stuff, but it'll come up in a different way. It'll come up in some way that he does not know unless he goes and like, and even you go and you talk to somebody about it, because it's there. We have to learn to process it and bring ourselves back and that emotional side back into our personal life, because you never will switch it off. Even me, I'm 5 years out. There's still, I'm like, things hit,
Always.
like I'll be see something, I'll be like, I'll ride my motorcycle, somebody be on their phone. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Like,
Correct.
don't worry about it. But it's
Mhm.
it's reintegrating yourself as such each time. You talk to military guys, they get reintegrated back in, whether it's good, bad, whether it is enough or not, who knows. But law enforcement, we literally are going to war every single day in a way, but never getting reintegrated back into our own society. So it's
Yeah.
that processing, like you've talked about. What would you say, Michael, what would you say would be like 1 to 3 things that you've learned over your 18 years in law enforcement? And especially like in the last 5 years, like you said, doing a lot of the development stuff on yourself, what would be the 1 to 3 things that you would tell new, or even, current law enforcement, first responders, so that they can prevent that burnout, prevent that divorce, prevent all the stigmas that we get, um, so they can have that happy, great life and career.
Chandler, so like I mentioned earlier with my buddy Valle, um, what I realized that a lot of us don't have self-awareness. We don't understand who we are outside of our uniform. And that's what inspired me to write my book last year, was literally self-awareness. And there's 3 areas I touch on in the book, 3 overall principles. The first one is define who you are. Who are you? Take off your badge, take off your uniform, and realize what's going on around you. What are some failures you've had in your life? How have they grown you? Because we all have failures. I mean, I could tell you, I mean, just anything in life we could reference. What has shaped you to being the person you are today? Because you do have to look at your past. You don't just completely erase that and think that it's not in your brain, because subconsciously your past is still there. You do want to grow from it. That's how you gain wisdom, but you just can't rule it out. So, what are some failures? What are some things that have been wake up calls for you? What are some goals you have? Like, what are some things you want to start achieving? So, that's the first thing I look at. Define who you are as an individual before you do anything else, because you will be happier when you know who you are. You will be able to fill that uniform up if you know who you are first. Second, why should you develop yourself? First and foremost, because you deserve it. You deserve it. Not your agency, not that next chief or sheriff that wants you to do what he or she wants you to do, but you owe it to yourself. Then you owe it to your family. Then you owe it to your organization. We all have something unique about us. And when we figure out why we're doing that, that's some of the things we're going to learn. Like, what is our role? What is our place in society? It ain't just to be in law enforcement. There's a greater purpose for all of us. So that's the second thing I look at is, why should I develop myself? Like, why should I do it? And the third thing is, become the best version of yourself every single day. Kobe Bryant, man, although he passed away a few years ago, he's one of my mentors. Not personally, just watching it, what he did, and the grind he put throughout his career, the passion he had, he carried it everywhere in his life. But he also always wanted people to be the best. That's why he was so hard on people, because he was like, I have so much belief in you. I know you can do better. And that's why he is one of the greats in basketball, because he always wanted to be great. And while you're looking at that, think about renewal. That's more of a psychology type thing. I had to learn that. It is the process. And that's when I mentioned earlier, mindfulness. When you're trying to figure out how to be the best version of yourself, you do have to slow things down to bring things into perspective. So the concept of mindfulness, using the 6-second method, breathing for 6 seconds, or inhaling for 6 seconds, exhaling for another 6, that actually works. It's very weird. I didn't think it worked. Trust me, as law enforcement, I don't want to close my eyes for 1 second. Sometimes I'm sleeping. I'm like, should I wake up? but honestly, it's one of those touchy-feely terms that we think we shouldn't do, but it works. It
Yep.
really does work. And
Yep.
then something else I have a part of that is have a 24-hour formula. That's a plan that outlines everything you do throughout the day.
Yeah.
But in that plan, you have to have personal development. Each and every day, you have to grow. If you're not growing yourself, you're going to do a disservice to yourself, your family, and your organization. So that's the three things I tell people. I recommend, I wish I would have learned this back when I was 19 or 20. Who am I? Why should I develop myself? And how can I become the best version of myself?
I love that, man. I love it. It's yeah, it's so true. Touched on everything. We speak a lot of the same language, just with our own words. And it's so true. All the stuff that we talk about, that we were talking about today, I wish I knew it back when I first joined. Tell us a little bit about your book, how people get in touch with you, a little bit about what, like, what you do and how people can find out about it.
So one of the things I've grown since my leadership journey and when I officially opened my business in 2017 is I focused on two things: self-awareness and leadership development. A lot of times before you even get to leadership development, you should know who you are.
Yep.
So my website, that's, if you go to my website, michaelaidler.com, you see some photos of me. It talks about some of the programs I have. But I think the most important thing that I was able to do last year was write a book on it. Greatness Beyond the Badge, the 3 key principles for self-awareness. It's very to the point. Greatness beyond the badge. Hey, you can be great outside of your uniform. Let's just call it what it is, because you are great.
Yeah.
And you have to take that uniform off one day. Trust me, the agency will still be around. The sheriff's office will still be around. But you will have to take that uniform off, because we're all replaceable in the eyes of the government, in the eyes of an agency, any corporation. You can say, oh, I'm the best project manager in the world right now. Someone's coming up next behind you. Trust me, they're trying to overcome that. So I'm able to deliver a lot of this through keynote presentations, workshops, leadership assessments, some of the e-courses I put out, virtual, obviously, webinars, podcasts. I do all of that just because I've learned that having a passion for others and hopefully helping them prevent some of the things that you and I have seen, Chandler, is important. Because 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have these opportunities. Not as much as we have now. Let me take it back. Once again, if there was EAP and stuff like that back in the day, I'm sure there was. But the way we're pushing it out right now, and what I'm learning as I grow my business and get my books in the hands of law enforcement officers, is that wellness and resiliency is really a big thing now, because we're realizing that we're dying too young. Our expected life expectancy is 7.5 years compared to the non-law enforcement, which is nearly 30 to 35 years.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. And what we're realizing is that we're not handling stress in our 25 to 30-year career. So we get this amazing pension. On average, we're only enjoying it for 7 years. That number doesn't add up. Versus someone that they might still have the same good pension, but they're enjoying it for 30 years. And they're enjoying their family for that time. So I've learned that delivering even short messages like that, messages like you have, Chandler, on Burnout, has been what has been driving the success of my business. And people are able to find me, like I said, my website. You go to social media, my main platforms are LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, and it's just at Michael Laidler. And you can find anything there about me or what I'm doing, the posts. I create videos through YouTube consistently, just trying to give people small tidbits on what they can do to grow themselves.
I love that, man. I love what you're doing. It's along the same lines. We're on similar paths, similar lines, and it's amazing to see, because you can never have too much of it, because like I've said before, and I say it all the time, law enforcement is the best job in the world, but it's the hardest. And it's one of the most necessary ones out there too. You don't have it, you get anarchy. So yeah. Last question I like to ask before we wrap up, and I'll open it up to anything else that you have to say. But last question I have is, what would you say your top tip to self-happiness is?
Realizing that it starts with you. No one else can make you happier than yourself. I'm
Very,
gonna keep it
very
that
true.
simple. I'm gonna keep it that
To the point.
because
To the point. I
hey,
love it.
I don't want
love
people
it.
overthinking this. Happiness starts with you,
Yeah.
not Michael, not Chandler. It starts with you, and then guys like me and you, Chandler, come in, and we help increase that through strategies and tips. But if you don't realize the process has to start with your effort and your hard work, go back to Kobe Bryant, someone I truly appreciate. If you have his kind of effort for your self-development and your happiness, then everything's going to come easy to you. Everything is going to be more enjoyable. You're going to be able to live past 7 years after you retire. You're going to enjoy everyday life. You're going to not have those ulcers that are coming up when you're 36 years old. And I haven't had any ulcers, but I've heard my friends tell me that. I mean, you're not going to, I've had friends that had stents and heart attacks at early 30s. I'm like, dude, what is wrong? And obviously there's a number of things we could talk about: health, energy drinks, bad diet, but a lot of it's stress on top of all that. But the happiness starts with you as the individual.
No, I love it, man. I love it. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here. Any last words before we wrap up?
I've had this quote since I opened my business, and it still sticks to this day for me. And the quote is, when I created on my own, it is simple: create your legacy. You decide your outcome. You're going to have obstacles. Everybody has obstacles. Depends on your religion, Jesus Christ had obstacles. So whatever you believe in, whatever you see, and if you are a religious person and you believe in things like Jesus Christ, he had the most obstacles. But his obstacles, he looked at them and said, I still want to do best for other people. Yeah. Same thing with you. You're going to have things that come up. They're designed to make you stronger. Don't quit. Look and find people that are going to help you. Everybody's been through something in their life. Don't think you're the only one that's gone through anything. Deaths, divorces, bad kids, bad finances, whatever you want to call it. Somebody cutting you off at the light. It's happened to all of us. We just have to understand that we can't do it alone. And when you're building your legacy, let that be part of it. Let people know this is a team effort. Everything we do, everything we create is always going to take someone else. And if you have any kind of family, remember what you're going to leave for them, because nobody has beat Father Time yet. No. My son was telling me the other day, he was like, Dad, I think the oldest person was like 115. If you get the 115, you're still going to die at 116. So have something that you build that shows people how important life is, because the best moment is now in your life. And when you understand that, I think it makes it easier for everybody, to include yourself, to be happy.
I love that, man. I love that. Great last words. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening, for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode around. If if there's somebody that you know that will resonate with it, or if you resonated with it, share it with just one person. Let's get it out there. Let's make this difference. And it's through sharing. If you are needing assistance, or you want to learn more about anything we talked about today, either go look up Michael. You can find him on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the different channels. Everything will be in the description down below also. And if you are wanting assistance from myself, just email me at Chris at knockingdemoncoaching.com, or you can go to our website, createfromwhy.com, and you'll see all the different things that we can help out with and how we can help you, your department, and also the different retreats that we're running. Till next time, train hard, test easy. We're always being tested, so may as well train for them. Till next time, peace out, stay safe. Love you all.